Lucy Potter is a PhD candidate at the University of Sheffield, focusing on migration research within the Department of Sociology. And she joins us today to talk about her latest project, focused on asylum research within the UK as relates to apostasy and blasphemy. Lucy, thank you so much for joining Humanism Now.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So before we start, I think our listeners will have heard a little bit about you because we've had played the advert or the announcement of your research on the last few episodes. Could you just give us a bit of background to yourself and how you came to be interested broadly in sociology and particularly in this current area of research?
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I guess my academic journey started when I studied philosophy. And I went into sociology mainly because philosophy is very sort of theory based, a lot of reading, but not necessarily research. And I really wanted to go out into the field and like work with participants and do that qualitative research. So I went on to do a master's in sociology. And then during my master's, I really picked up research interest in migration and asylum specifically. And yeah, just the interest grew from there. Asylum is really interesting. And ultimately kind of want to improve the system. So that's how I sort of got into this area. And then in terms of the project itself, it is it's a collaborative PhD. So it's working with a human rights organisation, Humanists UK, who they sort of acknowledged that there was this gap in knowledge, and there's no academic research onto it. So that's where I sort of stepped in as the researcher on it.
Fantastic. Yeah, our listeners will be very familiar with Humanists UK, or should be by this point. And how about your upbringing or background? Did you have a religious upbringing, or were you someone who are you finding out about these topics afresh through the research?
Yeah, good question. So I had like a Catholic upbringing, not too serious. I had a lot of freedom to sort of delve in and out of it. But it was more like, I went to all Catholic schools. My mum's Catholic, my dad's Church of England, but yeah, just not a very religious household. So as I moved on to uni, kind of explored other options, haven't been overly religious myself. And yeah, I would describe myself more as agnostic more than anything. I only actually heard of the term humanism when I started the project. So yeah, I've sort of acknowledged myself as agnostic, non-religious, but yeah, the term humanist haven't really came across it. I don't know the reasons for that. I don't know if it's just because I'm young or just haven't been overly interested in that sort of thing until now. But yeah, so I've been learning as I go along about what humanism is, other sort of alternative worldviews. Yeah.
No, I think it's extremely common, as you mentioned, to not know of the term humanism until presented with it. We've had quite a lot of stories from our members and guests about how they came to learn about it, often through close involvement like yourself, or celebrations, weddings and baby namings and funerals. It seems to be another key area that the word is spreading, but it's good that people are discovering it in more different ways. And so what inspired this specific project when we're talking about apostasy and asylum, and what are the aims that you're looking to discover?
So the project really started with Humanists UK a few years ago. So they noticed from the support that they offer to people seeking asylum that there were these repeated problems or misunderstandings with how non-religious asylum claims were being handled by the Home Office, in terms of the credibility assessment, and the way they sort of ask non-religious people to make sort of sense of their non-religious beliefs. So they didn't really know how to test it because they have to use like objective measures, and they weren't asking, say, the sort of correct questions. So one of the examples are that I think a lot of the listeners would know, and it's a well-publicized case, is the Pakistani humanist who was quizzed on Aristotle and Plato. Do you not know that?
I'm not familiar with this case. No, please. Yeah, no, it'd be great to find out more about that.
Okay, so so Pakistani humanist was asked to name ancient Greek philosophers who were humanist, and that was a way of testing their humanist beliefs. And their case was denied because they didn't mention, and this is what the Home Office said, Plato or Aristotle, both of which were religious. So
yeah, I think it's not even commonly believed that they would qualify as humanist, nor was humanism really a thing when they were around.
Exactly. So bearing in mind, not a lot of for a lot of people who do philosophy or are humanists would even know what ancient Greek philosophers practiced it. It's just not common knowledge. I did a philosophy degree and wouldn't even know that. So they're expecting someone to know that, for one. And then for two, the Plato and Aristotle both being religious, it just showed this huge misunderstandings on what humanists believe or practice, and just a complete disregard of what sort of humanism is. So this was the case that it was it started a lot of lobbying and advocacy work with Humanists UK. So yeah, if there will be articles online about it and stuff like that. So after that case, they started to, there was training at the Home Office that wanted to train caseworkers and decision makers on freedom of religion or belief. And a part of that was non-religious cases being fed into it to sort of, build on that understanding going forward. But yeah, since then, there hasn't been a continuation of this training. I think it was just a one-time training. And there's still been sort of these misunderstandings in asylum cases. So this research is to explore the barriers that people face, and because there's no academic research on it either, to fill that gap in knowledge. Yeah,
it sounds like there's even an education piece for those assessing the asylum claims as to what humanism or non-belief is, even before you get to the point of providing evidence that there may be discrimination against such a view. Okay, so I know you're not at the point of publishing the findings yet, but so far, what have been the general themes that you found, or initial conclusions that you can come to?
Yeah, so the point in research that I'm at, I should probably explain. So the PhD is 3 years. I'm in my second year. So second year is where you undertake your field work, and I'm nearing towards the end of that now. So hopefully December time, I should have most, if not all, the sort of data in, and then I'll have a time where I analyze that. But at the moment, so I've done interviews with human rights advocates, so lawyers, people who work for NGOs, academics, and then also refugees who have claimed on these grounds. And I think so. Some of the findings are highlighting these barriers that non-religious people face. So one that I've already mentioned is the issue with the credibility assessment. So issues with objectively testing subjective beliefs. And then to also highlight that non-religious people or humanists don't have any like set doctrines that they follow. They don't go to churches and stuff like that, which is what maybe Christian converts are tested on. So humanists and non-religious people don't have these things. So it's really hard to test and really hard to supply evidence as well, because you have to supply evidence for having a fear of persecution or being persecuted. But if a lot of people have a fear of being persecuted, but their belief is subjective and something they might not have expressed out loud, then they have no evidence for this. So it's highlighting that struggle of evidence that you have to supply, because the Home Office want to see objective evidence that they can test. So that's also one of the issues. Another issue,
that's it's almost waiting to receive threats before you can evidence them, which is probably leaving it too late.
Exactly. And then you've also got sort of issues with people who tend to come to the UK to study, and then they start to develop. They can explore different religions or beliefs in society. It's a different sort of way of life, and then their beliefs change when they're in the UK. So you've got those issues when you go to the Home Office. You make it's called an asylum claim surplus, where you're in a country for the period of time, and then the situation changes at home. So you've got issues with the Home Office, asking why are you claiming asylum when you've already been in the UK or you've been away from home for a certain time, and having to explain why your beliefs have changed. But it's really hard to explain, because it's just an inner feeling, and especially for younger people as well, to explain coherently their philosophical beliefs. It's really hard to articulate that when you haven't done it before, and especially religion as well, when religion has played such a huge role in growing up and a huge role in your way of life. When you start to abandon that, lots of people have like a really crises with it. It's really groundbreaking, and it really affects like their mental health as well. So that going to claim an asylum might be the last thing on their mind, or the way they claim asylum just isn't clear how to do that for them. So yeah, those are some of the issues, and then others are when they have their interviews, the Home Office supply or hire interpreters and translators for some clients that need it. However, there's been huge problems with this, because sometimes the interpreter or the translator is from a certain religious background or from their country of origin, and some have incorrectly or misleadingly translated concepts of religion or belief, either because they either don't know the language of the terms, or because they don't want to say anything blasphemous themselves. And these are huge issues. And where this has happened, people either have things incorrectly translated, which then has a knock-on effect with their asylum claim, because anything inconsistent, it'll be rejected.
There's so much to consider there. There's so many areas and so many grey areas, I think, where this can become an issue, because I would imagine for most people as well, this is all part of a long process. It's not that they overnight choose to leave their faith. And I think, as you mentioned yourself, many people may prefer not to associate with the term atheist. They may not be familiar with the term humanist. They might not have anything a term that appropriately reflects how they feel. They may just be experiencing doubts. Is that, again, something which can be problematic? Is even expressing doubts sufficient, or is that where it becomes a bit more of a grey area?
Yeah, this is a really difficult. Like, this is what makes these cases so complex, because you can sometimes have the so the participants that I have mostly spoken to, I've accessed them through Humanists UK, and that those type of people are humanist. they're very outwardly non-religious. They might have even done activism work. They might be bloggers online and stuff like that, and they have a very sort of passionate activist role. But the other side to it is, who I don't necessarily have access to these type of people, are people who are just taking on more secular views, and they might not necessarily be atheists. They might just have these more secular views or parts of religion that they don't necessarily like to follow. Or for some people, it might be more cultural. But for these sort of beliefs in a particular country might be deemed blasphemous. They might get in trouble for it because the boundaries for blasphemy can be just so tight. Any sort of comment that might be an insult to religion can be deemed blasphemy. So the stakes are really high. So yeah, it's hard. So then when you're in the asylum system, I mean, a lot of people don't know that apostasy is a grounds for asylum. So they might choose sort of other grounds. But yeah, these sort of secular, more cultural aspects is something that people can face blasphemy for. But, it's so tricky to sort of measure that.
Yeah, it becomes very fuzzy when you get into that realm. That I understand. Again, I know you're only part way through, but I'm wondering, are there implications outside of the UK for the research that you've conducted so far?
Yes, I think so. So even though it's UK based, this is the first piece of research to look at non-religious asylum claims, to the best of my knowledge, worldwide. So any sort of examples of these cases and the barriers that non-religious people face, I think will be applicable in other contexts. And there is a huge need to do this type of research. So if this research can encourage that in other contexts, then that would also be great. And as well as the asylum system. So the asylum systems, like across Europe, can be quite similar. I'm not an expert in them, but I think the way that they assess the claims are quite similar. So the look around policy and practice of these cases, I think, would also be applicable elsewhere. And then in terms of that training that I mentioned that the Home Office do, I don't think, or to the best of my knowledge, any other European governments do that. So in that sense, the UK is actually quite pioneering in that training. So if I could look into that and see what the training involves and if it's having an effect on asylum claims, then that is going to be beneficial as well for other governments to take on and to do.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, certainly, we'll definitely have to have you back on once you've finalised the research and published the findings, because I think, absolutely, this is something which is relevant globally at the moment. You mentioned still more to do, and you've spoken with a wide range of people involved in the system. Who are you still keen to speak with, and how can people get in touch with you if they would be willing to participate?
Yes, thank you. So I would love to encourage anyone who has claimed asylum on these grounds, or where apostasy has formed part of their asylum claim, to get involved. Can't stress enough how important it is to have people with that lived experience involved in the research and help shape it, because you will help shape the findings and ultimately, hopefully, help improve the system for other people. So anyone who's had experience with these types of asylum claims to get involved. I also want to specifically encourage women. So at the minute, my particular participants are quite male dominated. So I'd love to encourage any women to take part and share their experiences as well. Just a little bit of information on what taking part means. It will include an interview. So really informal chat with myself, and you will be made anonymous and unidentifiable in the research. So you can feel free to take part and know that you won't be identified to anyone. And we will discuss your experiences with the asylum system and any sort of suggestions for improvement. And you can contact me on my Sheffield email address, which is lpotter2@sheffield.ac.uk. And yeah, just give me an email and I'll have a introductory call to you and I can answer any questions as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And before we go, and what's the timeline now? And what are you planning for the remainder of the research? And when can we expect to hear about your conclusions?
Yes, so I hope to have the bulk of my interviews done by December. So really encourage people to get in contact with me as soon as possible. And then the next steps would be to analyze it all. And then in February next year or this year coming, I have a year left. So I'll be writing up my thesis, which I think is around 80,000 words. And then after that, I want to be working with the collaborative partner, Humanists UK, in disseminating the research. So I am thinking of writing a report with them and disseminating the research as wide as possible. I'm working with NGOs and secular organizations in lobbying for the findings and hopefully taking it to the Home Office as well. That would be great. But yeah, publishing as many papers as possible.
Fantastic. And just before we go, what is something that you've changed your mind on recently, either as part of this research or otherwise?
Okay, yeah. I think in terms of the research, so when I first started, I knew little about this area in terms of non-religious claims for asylum because it's quite a niche topic. So when I first started, I thought that it was going to be quite clear that it was just on the religion grounds. So you have like multiple grounds for asylum. I thought it was just going to be like under religion, but actually, as I have gone through the fieldwork process, apostasy is quite often intersected with other grounds. So lots of people have claimed it with a political grounds for asylum because leaving a religion is quite a political move in some places, as well as sexuality claims, quite often linked with that, and gender-based persecution as well. So yeah, it's really not as clear cut as just being religion. It's really intersected, and that just goes to show that, you know, people's identities are so complex and so unique. It's often not as clear cut as one thing. So yeah, that's what I've changed my mind, I think, on.
That makes sense, and it does sound as though, is it right to say that most claims are people have to choose one quite narrow identity feature in which to base the claim on, or are people warming to this idea of taking more of a overall look at someone's overall, you know, mix of personality or identity, and how that could combine together to contribute to the claim?
Yeah, so I think you can claim on as many sort of grounds as possible. And there are pure just religion-based claims where apostasy will be linked in. But where things are merged with others, it's the Home Office tend to focus on the one that they have more knowledge on. So if they have more information or training and knowledge on, say, sexuality-based claims, they tend to focus all their assessments on that ground. So yeah, but I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing to do. But if someone is claiming on apostasy as well as other things, that should be taken into consideration as well. And I think when they're focusing on other grounds, then perhaps that shows a sort of lack of understanding of apostasy claims that I think needs addressing.
Well, it just shows the importance of the work that you're doing. So Lucy Potter, thank you so much for everything that you've been, all the research that you've been conducting. Wishing you the best of luck with it, and we look forward to welcoming you back once everything's published. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, James. Thank you for having me.